you look at your goal setting sheet, you can see how you can work this out. And it's a great way to foster the growth of a trusting relationship. This is a great first step because you're working one-to-one with the person. They're sharing with you and you share back with them. I have worked with a couple of adults when I worked in a hospital. They were young adults who were illiterate. They weren't illiterate, and there's a difference, but they were not able to read anywhere near their age expectations or their grade expectations. And one of them wanted to be able to read hunting and fishing magazines, and that's great. He could use the same skills for reading hunting and fishing he could use on his job. And I think he got a job ultimately he went to some kind of apprentice school and got a job as a tradesperson. And his reading level was sufficient for that job. And that's really all he was interested in. He could have probably gone higher, but I helped him get to that point. And at that point, he was no longer interested in increasing his reading ability, and that was great. Another one, I was just thrilled. His mother called me after he was released from the hospital and told me that he was reading for pleasure. And this is somebody that I pretty much started with consonant, vowel, consonant words while he was in the hospital, and got him to the point where he would go to the library, check out books, and read them because he had a good time. So, and that was really just came from asking him and the other guy, what do you want to learn to read? How do you want to learn to read? So after you set your goal, you can look at forming a lesson plan, creating a lesson plan for teaching adults. Anybody got any ideas about what goes into a good lesson plan?
Some objectives would be good.
Yeah.
You need to have a learning intention, what you intend to get out of it by the end.
And if it's a reading lesson plan, you need to have pre-reading and materials, and then follow-up, and also...
Would it depend also on the stage of reader like it does for children?
It does. Also, if someone has a very, very low level of reading, it's always good to put in a writing activity. It may be a very modest activity for somebody who's a very low reader, and you can build that over time.
So if it was somebody who was just beginning, you might need a concept of word activity.
You might.
And
you might.
You might need the alphabet recognition activity. So the lesson plan would probably depend on the level of the reader.
Right. Yes, it would. It always depends on that. Now, with adults who are highly motivated and whose own personal goals you're meeting, you're probably going to find that they progress pretty rapidly. They move up pretty rapidly in their skill acquisition. It is still a developmental process, but not in the same sense as a child. Because a child, the developmental process of learning to read matches the developmental process of brain maturity. Whereas with an adult, you already have a mature brain, so they're going to move up pretty quick. Plus, they have all kinds of intrinsic motivation that children are still, at young age, still dependent on external motivation.
They have to be there, but the adult wants to be there.
Yeah, and the kid needs high fives and stickers and all that stuff, whereas an adult is just like, whoa, I read that. So you can see up here on the screen, we're going to go over goal setting, effective lesson planning, and the lesson plan format. We're going to look at some reading strategies and do some practice, and also have time for questions. I always have to point out my beautiful PowerPoints. Once I learned to do PowerPoint, I just could not be stopped. Here we have the needs of adult learners, and this is also in your packet, you'll find it there. And the 5 components of effective lesson planning. The 5 components of effective lesson planning, this came from the National Reading Panel. We always include all of this in what we're doing. Phonemic awareness, when you're looking at the very smallest unit of sound in a word, like the B sound in B, not buh, that's two phonemes, buh. Drives me crazy when I hear buh. Phonics, putting units of sound together to make words, fluency, and even in tutoring kids, tutoring adults, I tell them the reason for fluency is so that you don't have to stop in the middle of a sentence. And when you get to the end, you still remember what the beginning was all about. We're going to work on fluency. And you can work on fluency reading those authentic materials, but you can also pull in other stuff like poetry for them to read to get a flow in what they're reading. Vocabulary may or may not be an issue. It depends, because a lot of low readers are high speakers, and they may know all those words. They may use lots of words in language and just not be able to read them. And then, of course, comprehension, which is very important. It's the point of reading. So if you look at your lesson plan template, you can see I have a blank one, and I have one that's a sample in here. The blank one includes that warm-up or review. And of course, you're not going to have a review if this is your first time working with a student. But if it's second or more, you can review what you did during the last session. Your introduction is your pre-reading activity. And then we use the gradual release of responsibility model, the I do, we do, you do model. You might model reading a selection and read it with your student, and then have them read it for the you do. Each one of the warm-up and review can take up to 30 minutes. I don't usually take that long with a review. I usually stick to 10 to 15 minutes. But it depends on how involved it is. And also, if a student has missed a session, you might have to do an in-depth review to keep it fresh. Your introduction of this week's materials probably only going to take 15 minutes. And then when you get into the I do part of the lesson, when you're reading and modeling, 15 minutes at the most. Because that really is for them to hear how it should sound. Then we do is very quick. We read it together, maybe 5 minutes. And you do, read aloud with comprehension checks. You're going to stop them at pre-selected points during the reading so that you can ask them questions about what they've read so far and what it means. Then in your discussion, following the reading, you talk about what the reading was about, and you might ask for a verbal synopsis or a verbal summary of what's been read. And then move on to your writing, which should take 15 minutes. A brief summary, it might be 1 or 2 sentences. It might be a few words, or 1 word, depending on the reading level of the person that you're teaching, or the people that you're teaching. And then assessment, you make notes on what's happened. You talk about all of those aspects of reading, the fluency, the phonics, the phonemic awareness, the comprehension, all of that. You look at that when you assess the progress of your student. And then you discuss it with an adult. You may not discuss it right away with a child, but you do discuss it with an adult. They have come to you because they know they need help learning to read better. And then you bridge to the next lesson. You preview the next selection, and you look at the text features, you look at the length, hard vocabulary, pre-select things that you need to pull out for additional study. So that's in a nutshell. Do I have any questions about lesson planning? Y'all know how to lesson plan because you're teachers. Okay, you may need to assess a student, and I've included the San Diego quick assessment in your packet, and that's exactly what it is. It's a quick assessment. It's a an assessment based on words read in isolation. And before I became a reading specialist, I had no idea that these could get you so close to the actual reading level of a student. But they really do.
They do.
And it's very self-explanatory. It has stuff up here at the top, name, grade, and date. Just, you can put some white out over that, or most people don't care. You can see about where you want to start. You want to go ask the adult, what can you read, and kind of get a ballpark idea, and then look at the word list for where you think they might be and move up or down accordingly. And here you see your word lists. Very quick, this is a 3-minute test. And it'll give you a starting place. You may need to adjust later, but at least you'll have a place to start. Okay, when you're asking your pre-reading questions, you should think of some general open-ended questions that'll get the person's juices flowing. Like if they bring in or ask you for a magazine about sports, ask them, well, what is your favorite sport? And get them to pull up their prior knowledge of the subject. If it's about hunting, what have you hunted? What do you like about hunting? There may, I can think of a million different things, I'm not a hunter, but a million different things about going out in the woods to hunt. It's cold and brisk, it's exciting, it's early in the morning, it's beautiful, the woods are beautiful, all those kinds of things. I probably wouldn't really be interested in shooting animals, but I can think of a lot of things that I would like, and I would like to hear from them what they would like about hunting. And once they get their prior knowledge activated, they can tackle the process of reading with a lot more going for them, a lot more on their side. And again, it is up to the tutor to pull out the new or unusual vocabulary to go over with the student before they read, just to make sure they can A, read it, and B, understand it. Are there any questions so far? Talking to people who teach reading to kids, I mean, there's a key difference. Adults are different, but the processes and the skills are exactly the same. And then the post-reading questions. Prepare discussion questions to promote comprehension and consideration of what they've read. Again, they should be open-ended, like, do you agree or disagree with the author? And then followed with why, or what would you say the most important idea in this piece of literature is? If it's about, I don't know, NASCAR, and it's an article about tires, what is the most important idea about tires when you drive a NASCAR? And I have no idea what the answer would be, but somebody who's interested in it, whether they can read or not, they would probably be able to tell me that. And based on the article that we just read together, they can point that out. At the end of the lesson, if for only a few minutes, take time to talk about what went on, what the strengths are, and what we need to work on next week or next day, however often you tutor. And finally, I wanted to share with y'all, again, this is in your packet. I put some nice stuff in your packet. Identifying reading strategies for what do good readers do. Oh, I have to show you my cool graphic. Encoding and decoding. This is why writing is so important. Communication is a two-way street. We encode when we talk, we decode when we listen. We encode when we write, we decode when we read. So the reader and the writer are inextricably linked. The two processes go together, hand in hand. So that's why writing is so important. Like I said, even if it's one sentence or two sentences or a couple of words, and the words don't have to be spelled right, just so that there's something coming out in the form of encoding. And if they can't write a good summary, but they have a good summary in their head, by all means, listen to it. And that can be their summary, and you build up to the point where they can write it out. I included in your packet this section on identifying reading strategies. And this is all the stuff that I already talked about, the previewing. Well, there's more stuff here, the contextualization, which is very important for learning the meanings of words. Questioning to understand and remember, reflecting, outlining and summarizing, and evaluating. So those are things to remember as you're planning and as you're tutoring. And like I said before, it's not, that part of it is really not different from what we do with kids. Now I have a little activity here. And I'm just going to give you these instructions. Make sense out of this. Those are your instructions. And I'll give you a few minutes to make sense out of this. And my videographer really is exempt unless he absolutely feels that he has to participate. I know it's hard to run a camera and also take part in an activity. Is it making sense? Mm-hmm. Oh, I think you might have had the most challenging one.
Just the list of words.
Have you made sense of yours?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, would you care to share?
Well, I didn't read the whole thing, but
Oh.
It's talking about a king who had a rock placed in the middle of a roadway, and he was just seeing what would happen. People just walked around it and complained about it, but didn't do anything about it. And that's as far as I know.
Oh, okay. So how would you classify that passage?
Ms. Walker, you had a telephone call in the main office. Ms. Walker, you had a telephone call in the
Fiction,
main office.
nonfiction.
The genre might be fiction, but it might also be a certain type of,
Are you talking about, you're not talking about genre then?
no.
Okay.
No, I was thinking more like in the Bible there are parables, that could be a parable, or it could be a folk tale. It could be anything like that.
Makes absolute no sense.
Well, what do you have there? Tell us about what you have.
Looks like rig fapper.
Are those nonsense words?
Yeah.
So
Sure
you
thing.
are making sense out of them because you're reading them. How are you reading them? What are you doing?
Just using the sounds that the letter should make, and
So you're decoding?
it's a straight. I'm looking at if it's got an E at the end, then it's going to be a long A, and so on. But also breaking it down into the smaller words like rig.
Okay, so you're chunking it. I don't even know if that word's used anymore, but it's a useful word. And you're decoding by using word features,
Yeah, but that's
like your silent E and your double P.
Right.
Okay, that's making sense out of it. You were able to make sense out of it.
Even
that's
though it
still-
doesn't make
yeah.
sense.
Yeah, those are
It makes
nonsense
sense.
words, so they
Yeah.
don't make sense.
So they're not meant to. They're just
Right.
meant to challenge me to use my
Yeah.
coding. Yeah, that's okay.
And unfortunately, very often when you have an adult who has limited reading skills, when they look at the printed word, that's what they
That's what
see.
it looks like.
And they can't make sense out of it. First of all, what they're looking at is supposed to make sense and does make sense to other people, but not to them. And they don't have the tools to decode it. And there is no way a person with limited reading skill could make sense of that passage that I gave you. So those are sort of some of the challenges. There's another one that I gave Mr. Adams, actually. Dorothy had only one dress, but that happened to be clean and was hanging on a peg beside her bed. This is Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz.
Okay. No.
It was gingham with checks of white and blue. And the point is that you're supposed to figure out what gingham means by using context clues, checks of white and blue. And although the blue was somewhat faded with many washings, it was still a pretty frock. And you're supposed to figure out what frock means. from the context. And too often our readers with limited abilities are not able to use context or any other skills that we take for granted. I know I am a good reader. I could be a better reader, as we all could, but I very rarely have to look a word up because I use context. And if I do have to look it up, I use my computer and do a real quick search of it. But very rarely do I have to use anything to figure it out. And it's because I'm so good at context clues. And that's a skill that we want to teach. Are there any questions thus far?
I have one.
Yes, ma'am.
With the experience and the reasoning that an adult who cannot read has to use other skills to get by, when they do start reading and the comprehension strategies have been taught to them, are they a lot quicker in picking up on those skills because of all the other strategies they've used to get by?
I think so. I think anybody who can compensate the way most non-reading adults have compensated, I think anybody in that situation has become a real literacy survivor sort of thing, you know. So yeah, the other thing is they are highly motivated. They would not endure the potential for embarrassment, humiliation, or whatever to come to you for assistance in learning to read better if they weren't motivated. So here is someone who's brave and bright and very well experienced and has some years on them coming to the table. Yeah, I think they're going to pick up on all the strategies because they've been using strategies all their lives. And it makes you wonder how somebody could get to adulthood and not know how to read, especially when public education is free. Although I often marvel that anybody learns to read because it's such a complex process. It's awesome that we have people who can read.
You know, we see the children that slip through the cracks. So,
Yes, we do.
and we hope to catch them all, but in some schools, if you have teachers who are not personally giving a DRA assessment, then, and the child never has somebody actually sit there and they have to read to them, they can cheat. They learn how to survive, not knowing, and they're embarrassed, and so they don't want to say anything, and so the teacher could go along thinking this kid knows what they're doing, but they are actually just they're good at cheating and looking at other people's papers and getting by that way.
And using whatever limited reading
Yeah.
skills they have to
Yeah.
use test-taking strategies, which we teach them. How to select the best answer out of a field of 4. So, you know, again, you might have a student in your third grade, is that what you teach?
Third grade, yes.
In your third grade classroom who's got a DRA level of whatever that places them on grade level, and in your heart of hearts you know that's not where they are. You can use that quick assessment to get an accurate reading of where they are and teach them at their instructional level, their true instructional level, so that they don't get burned out and they don't wind up being an adult who can't read.
That's why I like that we do the DRA at the beginning of the year, even though they had it at the end of their previous year, because I would rather know
Well,
what
yeah.
I'm experiencing from the child.
And you know that you're giving the test the right way. You know that you're evaluating what you see.
Right.
So that, yeah, you're right.
And that somebody didn't just make up the score the year before, or that the child didn't regress because they didn't read all summer.
Yeah, and the other thing, this is off topic, but we've got this whole slew of unintended consequences with this new teacher evaluation system, where the teachers are under the gun to increase reading levels, DRA levels, by 10 points in a year's time. And that puts the teacher in the position of having to add 10 points somehow. And that's why I say it's so much better if you have your own data. And if you need to, use that quick assessment.
Well, I never set my goal at 100% of my students. I say 80%, because there's always going to be a child that
Right.
is not reading where they should be, and you've got to go back and reteach. I have one coming to me this upcoming year that's reading on a DRA 3 coming into third
You
grade.
can cut it off, we're digressing.
Yeah, okay, sorry.